In the late 15th century, England was a land torn apart by power, betrayal, and war. Two great houses, York and Lancaster, had fought for decades over the crown. Among the chaos, a young noble named Richard was born in 1452. He was the youngest son of Richard, Duke of York, and brother to the future King Edward IV. From the moment he opened his eyes, the world around him was divided. Noble families changed loyalties like the wind, and kings rose and fell in a single night. When Richard's brother Edward seized the throne in 1461, the young Richard became one of his most loyal supporters. He learned the ways of war and politics from the shadows of power, quiet, observant, and fiercely loyal. But loyalty had its price. As Edward's reign grew unstable, enemies gathered in secret halls. Whispers of betrayal, hidden marriages, and lost heirs spread like wildfire. Richard watched as the peace his brother fought for began to crumble. And though history would one day paint him as a villain at this moment, he was simply a man standing in the ruins of a kingdom, unsure of what destiny awaited him. By 1471, England was once again at war. The House of Lancaster had returned, led by Queen Margaret and her son, the last hope to reclaim the throne. But Edward IV, with his loyal brother Richard by his side, crushed them at the Battle of Tewkesbury. It was a brutal, bloody victory, and it changed everything. For his loyalty and courage, Richard was rewarded with vast lands and power in the north. He became the Duke of Gloucester, respected by soldiers, feared by nobles, and deeply trusted by the king. To many, he was the symbol of loyalty and order in a kingdom still trembling from war. But beneath that loyalty, something darker began to stir. Edward's health was failing, and his court was filled with intrigue. The Woodvilles, the family of the Queen, grew greedy, controlling, and power-hungry. They saw Richard as a threat, and he saw them as traitors in royal clothing. When Edward IV died suddenly in 1483, the kingdom fell into chaos once again. The crown passed to his 12-year-old son Edward V, too young to rule, and Richard became Lord Protector of England. At first, he promised to protect his nephew and keep the kingdom safe. But whispers began to spread through London, whispers that the boy was illegitimate, and that Richard had his own plans for the throne. Summer 1483. London buzzed with rumor and fear. Young King Edward V and his brother Prince Richard were taken to the Tower of London, not as prisoners, but, so the people were told, for their safety. Their uncle Richard, Duke of Gloucester, now ruled as Lord Protector. But within weeks, everything changed. A preacher in London declared that Edward IV's marriage had been invalid. If true, his sons were illegitimate, and Richard was the rightful heir to the throne. Days later, on a quiet June morning, Richard was crowned King of England. The people cheered, but the cheers were hollow. The two princes in the tower were never seen again. Some said Richard had them secretly killed. Others believed they were hidden away, alive, waiting for their moment to return. No one truly knew, and no one dared to ask. Richard III now sat upon the throne, powerful, feared, and utterly alone. But power gained through whispers and blood carries a curse that would follow him until his dying breath. It was 1485, only 2 years after Richard's coronation. England was restless. Many nobles whispered the same name, Henry Tudor, the last surviving heir of the House of Lancaster. From across the sea in France, Henry gathered his army and sailed toward England, determined to take the crown that Richard claimed as his own. As Henry's forces landed on English soil, Richard prepared for war. He believed destiny was on his side, that he had been chosen by God to rule. But destiny is cruel to those who ignore its warning. On August 22, 1485, the two armies met at Bosworth Field. Richard rode into battle wearing his crown, a symbol of defiance, courage, or perhaps madness. He fought bravely, cutting through enemy lines, shouting, "A horse! A horse! My kingdom for a horse!" But fate had already turned against him. Surrounded and abandoned by those he trusted, Richard fell, the last English king to die in battle. His crown was found bloodied and bent among the mud and corpses. Henry Tudor took it, raised it high, and was proclaimed King Henry VII, ending the Wars of the Roses. The House of York was no more. For centuries, Richard III was remembered as a monster, the hunchbacked villain of Shakespeare's play, the murderer of innocent princes, the king who clawed his way to power through deceit and blood. But history, like time, has a way of revealing its secrets. In 2012, beneath a parking lot in Leicester, archaeologists uncovered human remains. Tests confirmed what many thought impossible. They had found Richard III buried hastily after his defeat at Bosworth. His spine was curved, just as the legend said, but he was no deformed monster, only a man shaped by hardship, loss, and ambition. As his bones were reburied in Leicester Cathedral in 2015, thousands gathered to honor a king once cursed by history. A king who, despite his flaws, fought for his family, his name, and his belief in destiny. 500 years later, Richard III still divides hearts. Was he a hero, a tyrant, or simply human? History doesn't always give us answers. Sometimes it just gives us echoes.